Hey everybody, Randy here. Our fifth podcast season is moving right along. In this month's podcast episode, we're doing our podcast update. So in this episode, you'll learn more about what can you expect for the rest of our fifth podcast season, when will season 6 of the Work With Purpose podcast start, and what's the deal with our podcast newsletter. You'll learn all about that right now in our episode of the Work With Purpose podcast. Stick around. That show starts right now. Hey everybody, welcome so much to this episode of the Work With Purpose podcast. I'm Randy. I'm so glad that you're with us on this month's episode, kind of a special one that we've got for you. It's one that I like to do some point during our podcast season. It's called our podcast update episodes. As we get going into this episode, if you're new to our show, I want to remind you that we're a seasonal career podcast. You can expect episodes from us on the fourth week of the month during the time that we are in our podcast season, and usually that goes from January into August throughout the year. This year's season with season 5 is a little bit unique, a little bit different for us, but that's kind of how we'd like to do our podcast season. Is something coming to you on your favorite podcast platform, and even on a video version of our show here on our YouTube channel during the fourth week of the month. So glad that you are here with us. And the goal of our show is that we want to try to provide you as an adult with advice, education, and encouragement to help you in your career, and trying to do that in about 20 to 30 minutes or so. So let's get right into our podcast update episode. Again, kind of a unique, a newer episode for us here from the Work With Purpose podcast. All right, so as we get into this month's episode, again, this is a podcast update episode, so this kind of gives you the state of where we've been throughout our podcast season and things like that. So we've covered a lot of ground since we started our fifth season. As I recall back to episodes from our YouTube channel, had a chance to do an episode where I talked you through a couple of ways to like or love your job again. In 2024, I talked through another episode remembering and celebrating the life of career coach Dan Miller, talking about how can you use language skills on your resume. So if you look in the description below this video, and also, if you're watching us on the YouTube version of our show, or if you are listening to us on your favorite podcast app, if you look in the show notes with this episode, it'll have those links there as well, so you can check that out. And then also on the YouTube version, it'll have it in our description as well. So as we get into this month's podcast update episode, I want to let you know that right now we're coming towards the end of our fifth podcast season. So with this, when you're hearing this episode live, when it launches later in September of 2024, that's when you'll be hearing this podcast update episode later in September 2024. To finish out our fifth podcast season, I want you to know that later in October of 2024, I always like to do a best of the season podcast episode. So the last episode of season 5, you can look for that later in October of 2024. That'll be a best of best of season 5 of the podcast. I try to intersperse some clips of where we've been through the season 5 of our podcast, and try to add some more commentary and some things like that to make sure you've got that as well. So again, look for that end of our podcast season 5 coming later in October. And then the other thing too, I want you to know that after our last podcast episode coming up in October of 2024, our fifth podcast season will be done. And then from October of 2024 all the way until the very end of December 2024, that'll be our planning time. So you won't see regular videos or podcast uploads on our RSS feeds or on your podcast apps until the end of December. I will encourage you, though, be watching our social media channels. So be looking for us on our YouTube channel. You can check out our community tab at youtube.com/@ WWPcast. You can check out our Facebook page and all the other ways to connect with us. Keep watching our social media channels from October 2024 to the very end of 2024 during our planning time. We'll have some regular updates there. It might be once a week kinds of things. It might be once a month kinds of things. I don't want to over promise things there. But really, my goal is with October, November, and then December of the rest of this year. Really take some planning time to figure out what the vision and direction that I have for this intentionally free career podcast, where we're going to go for 2025. Want to take some time to plan that. Want to take some time to celebrate the holidays with family, and holidays, some vacation with family and stuff like that. So they want to give you some kind of context with that there. And with all that said, you might be asking yourself, Randy, when is season 6 of the Work with Purpose podcast going to come back? Well, right now I can tell you we are planning right now season 6 of the Work with Purpose podcast. It'll start up coming in January of 2025, and you can look for our episode. We're going to plan it to be out during the 4th week of January 2025, and we're going to go at this point from January 2025 all the way until the end of August 2025. That's kind of been a good rhythm for us the last handful of years. From that January to August time, we give you great episodes. We give you intentional clips and things like that. And then further down the line into 2025, right now our long-term goal is to use the September all the way to December to use that as our planning time for our next season. And the reason that I've done that before, and I'm planning to do that for our season 6 time of the podcast as well, as one that's helped for me balance podcast production and help this intentionally free career podcast to try to serve and help you as an adult on your career journey. It's helped it stay fun and helped it stay manageable for me as a producer, but also trying to give you high quality content that can meet you right where you are and that you can use. So hope that helps you as far as what to expect next for season 6 of our podcast. I've loved every opportunity that I've had to be as another caring person on the other side of the internet for you since 2020 when this podcast started. Whether you've joined us on your favorite podcast app or whether you have connected with us on our other podcast platforms, even on our YouTube channel as well. So again, real quick, let me summarize up. So we're finishing our podcast season 5. We've got this episode, our podcast update episode. It's coming later in September when you're hearing this right now. Then after that, in October of 2024, that'll be the last episode of our podcast season 5. That'll be a best of the podcast clips with some commentary from me in there. And then also the October through the very end of December 2024, that'll be our planning time. So no new updates for that. And then you can see our Work with Purpose podcast season 6. We will start back up again starting in January of 2025 with plans to run through the end of August 2025. Trying to think what else. That's pretty much a quick update of the podcast. So what I want to say to you, starting right now and between the very end of our podcast season and into the future as well, I wanted to put in front of you as well. Let me put this on the screen really quick here. Just a second here. All right, so if you want to join our newsletter, a free way that you can stay connected with our career podcast anytime, 24/7, 365, or if you want to stay connected with what we have going on with Work with Purpose Career Help, that's where we talk more about our career trainings, more premium career coaching kinds of stuff. You can join our newsletter. You can visit our website, www.pcast.com/newsletter. That's www.pcast.com/newsletter. That'll give you a little sign-up form where you can put in your name and your information, and then you can have firsthand access to all the updates that we get, some extra content that we only talk about in our newsletter, and you can be kind of in the know on everything that we got going on with our podcast and things like that. All right, so I told you about the newsletter. I wanted to make sure that want to make sure that you knew that as well. Beyond that, I wanted to also put in front of you, now that we have talked through the update of our podcast, I wanted to remind you that right now, as you are listening to this episode of the Work with Purpose podcast, I'll put a link in the show notes if you're listening to the audio version of our show, and then I'll also put it in the video description as well if you're watching us on the YouTube version of our podcast. Earlier in 2024, a couple month or so ago now, I had the chance to develop and put together a free career training event to serve and help you. It was called Overcome a Job Crisis. And it was all about if you are someone who might be job searching right now, or you've been recently laid off, or your department was dissolved, things like that. Wanted to put an intentional career training in front of you so that you could get hope, help, and encouragement to help you navigate a job crisis moment like that, whether it's a job ending situation or a job change situation that you didn't plan for or you didn't expect. Wanted to give you hope to work through that. So again, look in the, if you're watching us on YouTube, look in the description below this video, or look in the show notes on your favorite podcast app where you're getting this, and you can get a link to that. I will say right now that that Overcome a Job Crisis weekend career training, it's free right now through the very end of November 2024. After that time, that will be moved to more of a premium version of our training on our website. But again, if you look in our show notes, that'll give you the right link to get there, so you can take advantage of that in the next couple of weeks and months while it's still free as a resource for you. And then the last thing I wanted to say to you as well is that our career podcast, it is not something free for us to produce. So I wanted to put in front of you as well. I wanted to invite you as well that if you like what we're doing here at the Work with Purpose podcast, if you wanted to contribute to everything that we've got going on, I want to encourage you to consider supporting our work. We develop, just talked about our weekend career training events. That was something new that we started in 2024. I've got, if you visit our website, WWPcast.com/shop, that'll give you all kinds of information on the links and the resources and tutorials that we have there. Again, visit our website, www.pcast.com/shop, and you can connect with all of our resources right there. Okay, so after this break, we're going to wrap up our episode in just a second. But again, I want to say thanks so much for sticking with us here on the Work with Purpose podcast, and we will be right back. Hey everybody, Randy here from the Work with Purpose podcast. We'll get back to our episode in just a second, but real quick, I wanted to put in front of you a recent career resource that I had the chance to put together earlier in 2024 with our podcast, the Work with Purpose podcast. It's called Real Help for Remote Work. If you are wanting to work remotely, I put this training together to really help you find or start to find a remote job or work to get to working remotely in a purposeful, intentional way. So with this weekend career training, it's available in 3 different formats. We've got an audio version, a video version, and then an audio video bundle, so you can get this intentional, purposeful career training in a way that makes sense for you. You can, if you want to check out more details about this weekend career training event, this more premium career resource, you can visit our website, www.pcast.com/realhelp for remote work. And there's dashes between each word. Again, get Real Help for Remote Work, a weekend career training premium event from us here at the Work with Purpose podcast. To get your copy of Real Help for Remote Work, you can visit our website, www.pcast.com/real-help-for-remote-work. And now, back to the show. All right. Hey, welcome back to this episode of the Work with Purpose podcast. Randy Mahoney here. So glad that you are with us on this episode. Real quick with this episode, we have been talking through a podcast update with season 5. If you've been with us so far, you've learned about where have we been so far with our 5th podcast season. When can you expect season 6 of the Work with Purpose podcast? and a whole lot more. So again, as we wrap up this month's episode, I want to say a big thank you so much for watching and for listening wherever you are getting this podcast, whether it's on our YouTube channel or if you are connecting with us on your favorite podcast platform. Also, as we wrap up this episode, I want to invite you, if you've found this episode helpful, I encourage you consider sharing our podcast with a friend who might need it. There's so many people out there right now who are job searching, who are trying to take an intentional, purposeful step in their career. And by you sharing our podcast with them, our YouTube channel, a resource that you got from us as well, even our Work with Purpose newsletter from our website, our email list, and some other things like that, you sharing a resource from us with someone who needs it, that's you being a intentional and encouraging and a purposeful person. That's you taking action on what you know. And just, I would encourage you really consider sharing this episode, sharing this information, share our podcast with a friend who might need it. Be that encouraging person that they may need. Also, I want to say to you as well, if you're finding our podcast helpful, I want to encourage you on your favorite podcast platform, consider leaving us a rating or review. When you do things like that, that puts our podcast episode, all of our career information in front of new people so that they can engage with our show as well. And then also, I want to remind you as well, let me put this on the screen for the folks on our video version. As you are connecting with our podcast episode, I want to invite you to visit our website, WWPCast.com/most important links. There's a dash between each word. Again, WWPCast.com/most-important links. When you go there, that'll have all kinds of ways that you can stay connected with our podcast. It's got a way that you can join our newsletter. You can check out a lot of our different career resources and other training events that we've done. Talked about some of those earlier in our episode as well. But beyond all of that, as we kind of wrap up our show, I want to say a big thank you so much for watching and for listening and engaging with our episode. And until our next episode, my name is Randy Mahoney Jr. You've been listening to the Work with Purpose podcast. And as we wrap up this month's episode, I want to remind you of two quick things. Number one is this: you've been made with purpose, so work with purpose. And then number two is this: the best work that you can ever do is to serve someone else using your top skills and your top gifts, and to do all that for the glory of Jesus Christ. We'll see you next time.